Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, we have survived the freeze, but how are you doing? Your plant looks
I'm
great
doing well.
behind you.
It's
Plant
still
looks great.
alive. It's at a 45-degree angle, as pointed out by many on the board. I've tried tying it off at different times, putting a stake in it. It's strong. It just wants to be at a 45-degree angle. So the fact that I've kept this plant alive for like 2 years is the real kind of
Yeah.
hero's tale, hero's ending to this all.
Yes. Very impressive. Very impressive. But yeah, another busy week.
Man, when was the last time we had a pod? A week ago? More than that?
Yes, 6 days ago, I believe. It was last Wednesday.
Okay, so we did all the Bo Davis and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do we want to start? Let's start with we'll do coaching stuff and then we'll get into a portal ad here in a minute and just get our thoughts on it at the end. But the news of the week, certainly, Corey Raymond returning to LSU, one of the architects of DBU, alongside another former coach in Ron Cooper. Those guys were in charge for every notable DB that's been at LSU for the past 20 years. And after 2 years of not being at LSU, the defensive back room looks a bit different. They were very portal heavy. It worked in year one. It didn't work in year two. Now they bring Raymond back after Billy Napier parted ways with him at Florida. And a guy who at one point, Matty B, was, when Brian Kelly and them arrived, the longest tenured member on staff at 10 years as the LSU DB coach, and then became the corners coach when they split the rooms. But he's headed back. He played here. His first job was here. He's from here. And now, as he gets to the back end of his career, it looks like he's going to be put back onto the staff and stay here for however much longer we shall see.
Yeah.
But your initial reactions from someone who wasn't part of really the Raymond era, now that you see him coming back, you've covered this team for 2 years. What were your thoughts on seeing that being the hire?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously defer to you and your expertise in terms of the Corey Raymond era here. But just in theory, the talent acquisition aspect of whole thing of everything, he is one of, if not, one of the best cornerback talent acquisition coaches in the country. Obviously, we've seen that with just throughout, like you said, the architect of DBU. So you bring him back, you have a guy who can get you the talent that you need at cornerback to be competitive. Development is great, and we've talked about that. And his job will be, in large part, over the next couple of years to develop. But I think for me, just from an outside standpoint, looking in, is all right. We're going to get back to getting those 4 and 5 stars in that we know can play and will be developed and will be potential NFL players. So I think that's the biggest thing to me. And then secondly is continuing to just further build the fence around Louisiana. I mean, that's just what this staff can do now. And I think Brian Kelly has taken that to a level where it needs to be at. But now with Raymond, you pair him with Frank Wilson, and the staff as a whole, I just think the state of Louisiana continues to just be a priority, and it's further on lockdown.
Yeah, I will touch more on that when we get into another segment, kind of talking about all of the hires, because I went and looked up everyone's,
Good.
I guess you wouldn't say where they've been coaching at. I think there's some unique Louisiana stuff that people need to pay attention to. But when I look at Corey Raymond, I think immediately of not how it ended. So many fans were sour on how things ended. Well, yes, look, whenever those final two seasons, you were dealing with COVID in 2020. In 2021, they went 500 again in the regular season. You fired a head coach midway through the season, but then allowed him to coach out the season. Lame duck, whatever you want to describe it as, that doesn't bode well in recruiting. And through that transition, they only signed 15 high school guys. It was something like that. It was a very small number. Will Campbell, all of them were in that class.
15.
So Dwight McGlothern leaves. Eli Ricks leaves. I mean, there were a lot of talented guys on this team that were part of Raymond's classes, but then left. I don't put that on him. I mean, there were a lot of deficiencies on roster at the back end to where you go into a bowl game with only 38 players available. That's not a cornerback issue. That's a whole team roster issue. So I don't worry about that. And I know a lot of people have said, well, it didn't end well. Well, it didn't end well for anyone. That's why they let Orgeron go just a few years after winning a national championship. and bring in Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly cleans house, but 2 years later, he's bringing back Raymond as well as Baker, who was also on that 2021 staff, and Baker being the DC. But when I think of Raymond again, I think of, and just listen, Eric Reed, Jalen Mills, Jamal Adams, Tre'Davious White, Greedy Williams, Delpit, Stingley. Delpit won the Thorpe Award. Christian Fulton, Dante Jackson,
Yeah.
Jalen Collins. I mean, I could go on and on here. Even guys who were from Louisiana that ended up being top 3, 4, 5 round draft picks. Daryl Simon. Outside the state, Rashard Robinson, Jacoby Stevens, going into Texas all the time and getting guys, some I've mentioned, but Kerry Vincent, Eric Monroe, like these were all really highly touted guys coming out of high school, others that he developed into really good players. And look, you look at a Cordell Flott, like someone who was a 3-star in Alabama. They had went on, Corey Raymond liked him, went on him late, got him, committed, flipped him from Auburn, and he ends up being a really vital piece for them for a couple of seasons, a number of seasons. So Jay Ward would fit into that category. I just think from guys he's developed and gotten his 3 stars that went on to become NFL players, or going after those big names and getting them, it paid off for him, and way more often than not. And yes, there was the miss on Patrick Surtain Jr. that everyone still stings, and he goes to Bama and becomes a first-round pick. But that's what happens when you're shooting for the stars with literal 5-star corners year after year after year. In the NIL world, all this, you want someone who can recruit. And that's what Corey Raymond can do. And we know that these coaches have been around long enough. They know what, I think for me, and we talked about Bo Davis last week on the pod, but if the biggest worry spots, Matty B, were corner and D line, then I feel better that the hires are 2 former players who have both coached here before, who are very well known for recruiting and developing at their position, corner and D line. So if those are the worry spots, then they've addressed it in a very good way, because those are the two of the most respected names out there.
Yeah. And like I said last week, in terms of these being home run hires, I think Corey Raymond, I was kind of insinuating last week when I said that, is like, if they get Raymond or Robinson, whoever they got for this position, they were taking big swings. And I think they've connected on another big swing with Corey Raymond. So, like I said, you and Billy, and obviously all LSU fans know his history, know what he's done, know what he's capable of. And this just further instills, like you said, you are taking 2 coaches at defensive line and at defensive back that can kind of, I think, can turn their rooms around quickly, even if they're not the most talented that they'll be, in the coming years. In the coming years, we expect them to add more talent to the rooms. But I think just as far as setting a foundation, those are 2 guys who know what they're doing and have had obviously incredible amounts of success both at LSU and wherever they've been, really. So, yeah, he inherits a room has a lot of players in it. Now it's about, figuring out who's there to stay, who we can work with, and then obviously building from there. But I think it's just a tremendous hire for LSU.
Yeah, now I'm thinking in my head, Jalen Mills. I could keep going down of guys who are still on NFL rosters that he recruited. So
Yeah.
this reliance on the portal, I think, will always be there in a way. Like, you'll always, if a top guy goes in the portal, you'll go after him, especially if it's a guy, when we're recording this right now, Jameer Grimsley from Alabama, or who signed with Alabama and enrolled in December, is already entering the portal as a freshman because of all the coaching changes at Bama. Well, Corey was his main recruiter at Florida. He's from Florida, and now he said, I'm down to Florida and LSU. So, like, the portal's always there, even if you don't have a major need to address. But a guy like that goes in, and you're like, well, I was on him and his main recruiter. Now let's go back after him. But getting back to high school recruiting, developing, that will be the key for LSU to maintain any sort of long-term sustainability at DB, to get back to the DBU moniker and all of that. You've got to get the talent in, develop them, and then it plays out on the field. So that's what I want to see. I think they'll go back to it. And they took a big high school class this year, Matty B. So certainly they've got some younger guys they can work with.
Yeah. And not for nothing, the Blake Baker's defense at Missouri, I mean, between Chris Abrams, Drain, and Ennis Rakestraw, 2 3-star guys that, I don't want to say they were under recruited, but they were, 3 stars, end up at Missouri, and they end up blossoming. And Missouri was one of the highest pressure rate teams last year. Did a great job at making the offenses uncomfortable. You pair that defense with, the potential of Corey Raymond's secondaries, and it's hard not to be excited as an LSU fan. So I agree with you. The room as it sits right now, we've talked about it at length over the past 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It's a work in progress. I think it's big to get J.K. Johnson back from injury. We'll see how he continues to develop. We'll see how Jair Brown does, the transfer from Ohio State. And then you still got Ashton Stamps, and we'll see what they end up doing with Sage Ryan and Toviano and whatnot. But it's they got some players. They got some players, and I think the development aspect of Corey Raymond will be on full display this year.
You want to know the toughest part of what you just went through about Missouri's team was that Chris Abrams-Drain, former LSU commitment that they parted ways with, the former staff decided on, and many years later, he ended up being one of the best DBs in the SEC. So let's see if they can't get things turned around. But I give this hire an A plus, whatever you want to say, because I've seen the state of the corner and DB room right now. Like, it was never that bad during all the year. Like, you're going to say, oh, well, it was right when he left at the end. Yeah, LSU was a 500 team. They've won 10 games in back-to-back seasons with a DB room that is this. Like, you've got to be able to elevate that. Corey Raymond can do that for you.
And he still had, and there was still, Stingley was still, like, there were still injuries in the last 2 years that they dealt with too that were out of his control.
Yeah, no, Stingley for sure, being injured for half the year and sitting out, then having to prep for the draft and becoming a top 3 pick. So I love this hire. I think it will work out well for him. I'm not in the camp of disbelievers, how big or small it might be. And I think the majority of LSU fans, and certainly, and this is probably what matters, recruits, former player, all that are behind the hire. They like it. So that's the kind of initial waves you want to make. Let's do a little ad read. Rogue Shop, who we've rocked with from the start since we've been at the Bengal Tiger, even before us. Billy was here rocking with Rogue Shop. But yeah, you guys know it now. Rogueshop.com, ROGUE shop.com. And you've got the promo code Bengal Tiger, one word, and it gets you 10% off your order. That will take care of shipping plus some. So it's always an easy deal. But any issues with sleeping, chronic pain, anxiety, stress, you name it. Those are kind of the main things that Rogue Shop deals with. They sell CBD, THC, edibles, tinctures, everything from the bath salts to the pain creams. Billy uses the pain cream all the time. He's getting old and still plays hockey, so his old bones can barely
like
take
11
it. 11
p.m. at night, he'll be out there playing hockey.
He shifted it up this week. He was like at 6 a.m. playing hockey. I was like, what's the issue? And it was like 10 degrees in Dallas. He's like, well, it's warmer inside with the ice. So I don't know. Billy loves him some hockey, but for old folks like Billy, who's growing old now, pain cream he uses, rubs it on the knees, elbows, says it works. But topicals, everything, soaps, no matter what it is, they've got it handcrafted. They grow all their own cannabis in the manufacturing facility they have. Everything's made completely homegrown. And they are America's #1 online dispensary health and wellness shop. What we love is the chat. You can get on there at really any point, and the chat will pop up. It's not a bot. That's Shar, one of the 2 people who run it, and she is there to chat at pretty much all times about if you have questions or whatever it might be. So give them some support. They are, like I said, a site that started out as a small business, but run by a disabled vet, a woman-owned company. So we've been rocking with Rogue Shop for a couple of years now, and appreciate everyone who's continued to support them. So get on the website, check it out, browse it. They have like 100 options of things you could choose from. But if you find something at checkout, Bengal Tiger is the promo code, one word, 10% off your first order. Maddie B, there were obviously more news this week that we broke on the Bengal Tiger, not just the Corey Raymond news, but news of Jake Olson, who was an analyst at Missouri that Blake Baker brought with him when Baker got hired as the DC. And in the meantime, they have gone through a ton of interviews, and they interviewed, and vetted double-digit guys at DB before they came to Corey or came back around to Corey and said, okay, this is the guy we want to hire. Jake Olson also gets the nod, we've learned, for an on-field position. We'll see exactly what it is. He has experience with safeties. He's got experience with special teams. But this is a young guy who cut his teeth really coaching around Louisiana, not from here, but has already made stops at 4 different Louisiana colleges, including LSU before. So A lot of people around the state, from Nichols to Northwestern to ULM, know him, have spent time with him, think he's an up and comer. And I can tell you that Blake Baker is a very, very big fan. So when I tell you, Maddie B, that on offense, you know what you've got. You've got Frank Wilson at running backs coach and associate head coach, recruiting coordinator, whatever labels you want to slap on him. Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton did quarterbacks and wide receivers and then became co-OCs, interim, which we'll touch on that more in a moment. But Brad Davis, another Louisiana native who's been coaching up the O-line, the only holdover from the old regime on Brian Kelly's staff, is still coaching up the O-line. So we feel great there. They finished with the number one offense in the country. I know you lose Mike Denbrock, but there is a sense that stability can be maintained if you continue on with a promotion from within, and a guy like Sloan is in the booth like he was in the Wisconsin game. Hankton's on the field with the players. They did a little co-OC duties, and it seemingly worked out well for the offense. They started clicking, and Nussmeier had a big first start, throwing for nearly 400 yards. We know about that side of the ball. I'll touch on it in a minute here. But defensively, we've brought up Corey Raymond. We've brought up Bo Davis at D-line coach. We brought up Blake Baker as the DC and linebackers coach, and then brought up Jake Olson as the guy who's going to slide in somewhere. The other addition is Kevin Peoples. And once again, they're going to split the D-line and then like jack linebackers or edge or however you want to describe it into two rooms. It's pretty commonplace. They did it even at Texas when Bo Davis was there. But Steeples has been coaching for 29 years. This will be his 30th. Peoples, excuse me.
Yeah.
This will be his 30th year. And people say he's a great developer, a great recruiter. He's held in very high regard around coaching circles for what he's done across his career with D linemen from Arkansas State. He spent 4 years at Tulane. He's been at a number of different colleges, but then at Missouri, they had a really good D line. Baker brings him down. When you look at this group as a whole, what's your reaction? Because on paper, to me, this seems like an A+ staff to put together in 2 weeks. I mean, Brian Kelly went from firing everyone that worked on that side of the ball to now they have this staff.
Yeah, in 2 weeks, like you said. I touched on this last week, but now that it's all set in stone, I think we can expand on it even more in terms of this feels like not only home run hire is one thing, but it feels like these are names that you can say in Kevin Peoples that have done this for multiple years and have excelled. And then also, I think the Blake Baker aspect of it and bringing Peoples in terms of what you're getting there, what you're getting at the outside linebacker, or I think they called it the star position at Missouri last year. So star or that might have been a nickel, wherever they have, like wherever the defense is for Blake Baker, you bring in Peoples to further instill that on the defensive line, help the continuity aspect of it. And I just think overall, between him and Olson, you now have two guys that Baker's comfortable with, and then you have two, the home run hires, in my opinion, in Davis and Raymond. So overall, it checks all the boxes. I'm trying to look at this through like a pessimist standpoint, just in terms of, all right, it seems perfect on paper, but what could possibly go wrong? And I don't know the answer to it because Peoples is solidified, Raymond solidified. Davis is known in the industry. Like Baker, I think, is probably the only question mark because he has so much to do in terms of installing his defense. That's maybe the only question mark, is he's still, as a defensive coordinator, has to excel at this level, which, he did at Missouri. Now you have to do it at LSU. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be really good. And now he has a really great staff around him. But that might be my only question now is, all right, Blake Baker, you have this great staff. You're going to recruit at a high level. Now let's see you do it on the field, the X's and O's, the development of the linebackers, which he's done. But doing it at this level when all eyes are on you feels different, because now expectations are you have everything around you. You have all the resources you need. Go produce a top 20 defense every single year. And now, obviously, this first year, you'll have some leeway in that. But from that, after this year, it's going to be top 20 defenses. You're going to have to pump them out, or else people are going to be like, hey, we have Garrett Nussmeier, we have Bryce Underwood. The defense has to keep up. If not, then you're going to be looked at, just like Matt House was.
Yeah, well, LSU would have taken a top 60 defense last year and may have won a
Yeah.
national championship with it. They finished in the hundreds. But 2 years in a row, he finished in the top 40 with Missouri.
Yeah.
That obviously led to them having great success. They landed in the New Year's Six Bowl. They win it. Quickly on Baker, because we can talk about all these other guys plenty, but what is the thought process for you? Because 2 years ago, look what he did or 3 years ago, when he was here at LSU as linebackers coach, he took Damone Clark to a new level. And
Yeah.
Damone Clark's a guy who plays in the NFL now. How eager are you to see, or kind of what's your initial reaction to what this does for Harold Perkins, for Whit Weeks, for Greg Penn, the three guys are going to be big pieces at linebacker?
Yeah, I think I wrote a story on it when Baker was hired, I think, but I forgot the first name, but Daron Harper, Hopper, the development that he did with him at Missouri, I think is applicable to what he could do with Harold Perkins and even Whit Weeks at LSU. I think Damone Clark and Greg Penn have similar skill sets and frames, so I think those are where LSU fans have to be excited at the linebacker position, because Matt House didn't feel like it felt like he maybe took an NFL approach with college guys, or maybe he didn't understand how to develop them in the same way, which might be unfair. But Blake Baker now for the past 3 years has had pretty much an all SEC uh, linebacker, Damone Clark to Hopper at Missouri. So we know he can do that, and I think that's the most appealing thing. Him as a position coach is not in question at all. I think he is an A-plus linebackers coach, and he's proven that over the last 3 years, and he even proved that beforehand in his career. But now it becomes, about the entire defense. You are the head honcho on defense as the defensive coordinator. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. But as a linebackers coach, I have no questions about him. He's going to accelerate the process, and I want to be on record saying this now, even if I'm wrong. I do think Harold Perkins should try to be an inside linebacker with Blake Baker, to at least in spring ball, to see what he can do. I just think that he could really excel there under Baker.
It's going to be one of the more interesting, I think, topics of conversation for the offseason, is where kind of how that all fleshes out in terms of how they want to use Perkins, and then certainly getting Weeks onto the field. And Penn has just been a really valuable player.
Yeah.
I think that Blake Baker can do for Penn what he did for Damone Clark. Like, they
Yeah.
remind me of each other in a way to where, yes, they hit the stats, but there's that untapped potential that's still there that maybe he can unlock. So excited to see what that looks like. Let's get another ad read in here. Game Time. Everyone knows Game Time, the number one ticketing app out there. Game Time app is an easy download. Just go to the App Store, type in Game Time, one word. It'll bring you to the download unless you already have it. But if you've not used it yet, the promo code is Tigers, Tigers. It is $20 off your first order. Terms apply. But download the Game Time app again. If you don't have it, create the account, whether it's at the start or the end when you're checking out. Promo code Tigers and 20% off, or $20 off, excuse me. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. That's the Game Time motto. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They harp on the last minute ticket deals and the best price guarantee. I love the flash deals, which kind of anytime right before an event or as it's getting going, you can get on there and find them for sometime as cheap as 25% of the original value of what they were being sold for. And I also like the image view of the seats. I will say they've got some games at the PMAC folks should probably be getting on Game Time for, because the men are red hot right now, Maddie B. The women are obviously took an L at Auburn. They're at Bama tonight as we're recording this, or I guess tomorrow?
Yeah, tonight.
But on the road. But lots of games coming up as SEC play rolls on, and McMahon wants folks to pack the PMAC. They got I would call it an upset win over a top 25 team, but that would not technically be correct because LSU was favored, but they covered and then some with a double-digit win. So, Maddie B, might be a little tough to get South Carolina tickets, but if you want them, they're probably on the Game Time app being resold for a price that I'm not sure I've checked out yet, but it's going to be up there. That will be sold out. But I don't know. LSU gymnastics, everything that's going on at the PMAC right now. Baseball season's about to start. Game Time has so much LSU stuff on there in terms of ticket availability. So be sure to at least download it, give it a look, and if you end up finding any tickets to anything, concerts, that promo code is Tigers, and it gets you $20 off. All right. The rest of the staff, we've talked about all that. I firmly believe that the best way for them to just move on with the continuity of the current offense with Nussmeier, you're returning 4 of the 5 starting O linemen, coupled with you've got Bryce Underwood committed, all of this is Joe Sloan and DeCorian Moore, another 5-star, Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton remaining on staff. Whether it's co-OCs or an OC, I don't know what the exact plan is, but I have heard no buzz about anybody else outside of the building. So I firmly believe that the hire will come inside the building. Then there would be a tight ends coach. And I still think they're eyeing a tight ends coach as an on-field role. That was Denbrock's job as the OC before to coach the tight ends. So they had that position on field. Now that he's gone, whether it's Sloan, Hankton, them together, they don't coach tight ends. They coach quarterbacks and receivers. That's a group in the Brian Kelly offense, I feel like, that he really wants to have a position coach at. And when you've got Pimpton and Mark Way and Mason Taylor as your starter, and then you sign the number 1 tight end and Trey'Dez Green, you really want to put a coach there who can really develop those guys, bring them along. And we've talked about it a ton on the pod, Matty B. Jaden Daniels didn't need Mason Taylor all the time. Garrett Nussmeier does. Like, he will work the tight end. I think they're going to work more 2 tight end sets next year. I think it'll look more like a typical 12 personnel Brian Kelly offense would at times. But your thoughts on maybe not the tight end, because I think that we will see a tight end hire. And if so, Tulane Slade Nagel is a guy who's sort of led the way, I think, is the top candidate, but we'll see which direction they go. But your thoughts on the co-offensive coordinators, because I'm in the camp that if you fired everyone on defense, and you mentioned it, Baker's now tasked with, I have to install my defense. I have to get all these new coaches in place. Everyone's got to now get onto this page. When you just finished with the number 1 offense in college football, yeah, you lost your OC, but the playbook's there, all that's there. You can just keep it rolling. Is there any reason to look elsewhere?
I don't think so. I think you laid it out well. If you did hire, like, hiring an offensive coordinator and keeping the rest of the staff feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like, that's the whole thing, is when you hire an offensive coordinator, I feel like you should be able to bring in a position coach of his liking, but that wouldn't be the case here. So I feel like if you went around and looked for an offensive coordinator across the country that would take a job where he would be stepping in to the number 1 offense in the country, but he would be the only change, right? The rest of the staff would be the exact same. I feel like that would be a lot of pressure on you, right? You come in and let's say you fall off a little bit. If you're the 15th ranked offense or the 20th ranked offense, everyone's going to look at you and say, you're the only change here, right? We have, obviously Garrett Nussmeier in place. You now have receivers, like the personnel. You return 6 starters. We return all the position coaches. You're the only change here. I feel like that's asking a lot of an offensive coordinator, regardless of who it could possibly be. So I do think at this point, and you've mentioned it, we haven't heard any buzz or extended interviews on the offensive coordinator side. It feels like it should be Sloan or Sloan and Hankton. And I think that's the right way to go about it. They clearly have the respect of the players. Like you said, I think they are recruiting at a fairly high level. Obviously, Sloan got his gym in Underwood. And with the way things are rolling right now, I just don't see a reason to change it. I think you can maybe be more selective in a year or two, but or not selective, but you can maybe be a little bit more critical in a year or two. But at this moment, with the way that they prepped and the way they performed in the bowl game, there's no reason I think to change it up right now.
100% with you. And you get to keep Garrett Nussmeier clicking. The O-line knows what they're doing. Nothing changes for them if you just keep the playbook, everything in place with this offensive system.
I do wonder because we talked about tight ends, how much, like, Denbrock was clearly intent on using tight ends. And I say that knowing that they weren't using 12 personnel like heavy last year, or especially in year 1. But I do wonder, with, like you said, with the talent at tight end that they have in that room, if Denbrock would have stayed, if he would have gone to more 12 personnel. Now with him gone, if it is Sloan and or Hankton, do they look at the tight end position in the same way? And if not, will Brian Kelly kind of push them in that direction? It's an interesting, I guess, complexity to this in that way, but also you have to add the fact that Trey'Dez Green and Kamorian Pimpton, I think, can both play the slot. Like, I think they could both flank out at receiver pretty comfortably. So I think you can be versatile in that regard with them, to where you're not as dependent as you are with other like 12 personnel sets.
I'm 100% with you, 100%. So I think when they do find a tight ends coach, I think they probably promote from within an OC, and that would round out the staff. So special teams, we'll see. I think the tight ends coach could honestly, if it's a guy like Nagel who has a special teams background, can help out. Like, it feels to me that the days of a dedicated special teams coach are gone, because for one, you're kicking it out of the end zone. Most teams, that eliminates kick returns and kickoffs, really. I mean, that handles that. Punt returns is pretty much the big factor, and then field goals. But even then, every field goal kicker and punter you'll ever talk to in college will say all the greats. I mean, and even look at a guy like McMahon at LSU most recently, they'll say they didn't punt or kick in college, so they don't know, they don't teach me that. Like, I already know how to do it, and then I work on my stuff in the off season with a trainer, and it's not like that hands-on technical. It's more about, your coverage units, all these different things, blocking assignments being correct, which cost them a win in 2 years ago to open the season against Florida State on an extra point. But you can kind of split those duties up. I'm fine with that, whether it goes to an on-field coach who has another role like a tight ends, or it's also then handled by like other coaches chipping in or analysts. Whatever direction they want to go there, I'm good with.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when if your offense is rolling the way that your offense rolled in 2023, it definitely negates how much weight is on special teams, as we saw punt coverage and kickoff coverage and field goal units. I mean, they were going for it on fourth down a high percentage of the time anyway. So, yeah, I agree. I think you're better off having either that second defensive line coach or a tight ends coach. And you could find coaches that have coached special teams, because honestly, it feels like a large majority of coaches have coached special teams at some point, or at least helped out with special teams at some point in their career. So, yeah, I'm good with it.
All right. We'll wind this podcast down. One more ad read, because we only did one pod this week, but then I want your opinions on their latest transfer portal ad. But first, My Perfect Franchise. You guys know it. We did it after every game, me and Maddie B, on our post-game reaction pod. But Andy Ludicky is a franchise owner, franchisees, helped out so many different people, including folks on the Bengal Tiger over his decades in the industry. But he runs My Perfect Franchise. You can look it up online. Just type in My Perfect Franchise or go to myperfectfranchise.net. And what he does is helps anyone out with anyone's trying to get into becoming a franchisee, or maybe on a part-time sort of side hustle. He can help you out, whether it is a passion of yours that you just don't know which direction to take it, or whether you've seen other people getting involved in franchises and want to know, how much is it going to cost me? How much time is it going to cost? Whatever type of requirements go into it. Andy can help with all of it. And the best part about it, we say it every week, 100% free. To give him a call, give him an email, get on the phone, talk about kind of the spot you're in. Maybe you have a full-time job. Maybe you're looking for a new, line of work, or whatever it might be. There's so many people becoming franchise owners or part-time owners that Andy wants to be able to kind of spread the word that, hey, he's here as a consultant. And he can do it for you for free in terms of reaching out and just getting those initial conversations in. So give him a call, 404-973-9901. That's 404-973-9901. Or email him, Andy@myperfectfranchise.net. That's Andy, ANDY, @myperfectfranchise.net. Again, services are 100% free for any questions about business ownership you might have. He's done it, as I said, for multiple decades. So he's got plenty of stuff that he can share in a wealth of knowledge in that realm of work. So shout out to Andy. Appreciate all he does for us and continues to do for people on the Bengal Tiger. A lot of people have reached out and used him. So moving on, the final thing, I'll set this one up for you, Maddie B, because I'd like your take. You did a breakdown on him. CJ Daniels out of Liberty, wide receiver, is headed to LSU. A lot of college teams wanted him, but he picks the Tigers. Your initial reactions to a receiver that I will offer this up to you. Only 11 guys had 1,000 yards receiving and at least 10 or more touchdowns combined last year. Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors were two of them. So now you're down to 9. Two of them were on LSU's team. Only 5 of those guys, including all of them, Brian and Malik, are playing football again in 2024. CJ Daniels is one of them. He's coming off of a Jamie Chadwell coached offensive team that lit up the scoreboards. They landed in a New Year's Six Bowl. They played Oregon. CJ Daniels played very well in that game. You lose Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, but you add a CJ Daniels in addition to Xavier Thomas, who we've talked about a ton out of Mississippi State. But we'll make this one about Daniels. You watch the film. Give the breakdown to LSU fans of what the Tigers are getting here and a guy who clearly has the production.
Yeah, he has the production. Obviously, your first question when they get CJ Daniels is, all right, well, Liberty was known for having the worst strength of schedule in the country. So I went into it wondering how much of it was that. But then you realize also Liberty had the most rushing yards in the country for non-service academy teams and the highest rush percentage rate. So he was going back and watching the film of Liberty, trying to find CJ Daniels catches or routes and whatnot was a little bit of a chore. You have to sift through all of the read options and triple options and stuff a little bit, but still a really good offense. He had Caden Salter as his quarterback, who I watched Caden Salter in high school. That dude is an absolute baller. So he had the quarterback advantage in most games, but I don't think that takes anything away from what he did last year. And the upside that he has coming to LSU, I think some people have said he's a Malik Neighbors replacement, which I could understand in theory, but I think he's more of a Brian Thomas replacement. You look at his yards per reception at 19, you look at his average depth of target, which is 15 and a half, which is more than Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. I mean, definitely Malik Neighbors, but Brian Thomas, I think, was at 14 or so. So we're talking about a guy who is a deep ball threat, great tracking ability in the air. We hear that a lot in recruiting, but just the way he can adjust his body on deep balls, even when he's like falling out of bounds or has a defender draped all over him. It's all, I mean, in the story that I wrote, I put GIFs in there, and it's just highlight after highlight of him adjusting and turning his body and getting a foot down out of bounds. And you're like, all right, that's all I needed to see. That's really it, because the hand-eye coordination is there. I think the top end speed isn't like, it's not Malik Neighbors, right? He's not super shifty in that way, but he's not going to be used in that way, I don't think. I think he's going to be used like a Brian Thomas to take the top off defenses. I think he can be a lead in that respect. And the hands, the coordination, and I think his release off the line of scrimmage is what makes him elite. So yeah, I was really impressed. Let me look through the story real quick, see if I forgot anything, but yeah, he's really good. I'm interested to see, like I said before, he didn't play a P5 team or all year. He didn't even play really a good mid-major or a good G5 team in Conference USA. So I'm interested to see him take that step up, because he's not the most physical receiver, but I do think there's enough tape on him in terms of watching guys try to jam him, try to press him, and he gets off of those pretty easily. So yeah, love the big playability. I think he's a Brian Thomas replacement, and I mean that in a very positive light, obviously, after the year that Brian Thomas had. I look at Xavier Thomas as more of a Malik Neighbors replacement, a guy who can do a little bit more on the in-between and the short route stuff and get the yards after catch. So love those two additions. CJ Daniels to me is wide receiver 1 at this moment in time. I like Kyron Lacey. I like Xavier Thomas, but to me, CJ Daniels has better tape. He has more proven production, and he's a veteran. I think he's 23 years old, right? So this is a guy who knows what he needs to do in this last year. He's going to come in ready to play, and I just love this pickup for LSU.
I'm with you. And for the people that worry, well, what does this do to Shelton Sampson or Kyle Parker or younger guys on roster? You have to just keep making the team better. Competition's always going to be there, especially in this era of the portal. So if you just lost my response to that is, because people say, aren't there more glaring needs, corner, DT? That's not deterring them from addressing those areas. But you lost a finalist for the Bolitnikoff, who led in Neighbors, who led the nation in touchdown or receiving yards. I'm sorry, and you lose Brian Thomas, who led the nation in touchdown catches. So that's two massive pieces. If you know your defense will probably still have some struggles, regardless of a complete staff turnover, doesn't it make sense to restock your number one offense with another proven player? I would think that LSU fans, I think, were met with this one with a little bit of like, well, don't we have receivers? No, you don't
Yeah.
have any receivers that were 1,000-yard guys on the team. No, you don't.
No, you don't. You don't. And I again, I like Kyron Lace. I'm actually pretty.
I
I
do
think I
too.
said last podcast, right, where I was like, all right, we had to predict the top 3 receivers. I was like, Kyron Lacy to me is the guy. I think he can be a good player. He's not. I don't look at him in the same light that I look at Malik Neighbors. I don't look at him in the aspect in the light of being that no doubt first round receiver. I don't think he's that level. I think he's good, not great. Chris Hilton, I think he could be good, but we just had a whole year where he was healthy and Kyron Lacy was clearly better than him. And Cortez Hankton clearly went to Kyron Lacy over him. Aaron Anderson, those guys I think are fine players. But to go back to your Shelton Sampson point, I'm really high on Shelton Sampson. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Shelton Sampson maybe fought Kyron Lacy for a spot, fought Xavier Thomas for a spot, fought Aaron Anderson for a spot. If he's ready, I'm not looking at Kyron Lacy and Chris Hilton as being like, oh, well, those guys are just too good. Shelton Sampson can't pass them up. CJ Anderson is the only one to me that is on a tier of his own. Everybody else is in competition for 2, 3, 4. Like, it's his competition at this point. Shelton Sampson, if he is that level to where he could have a Keyshawn Butte type sophomore season or freshman season, like, then he will be in the rotation no matter what. He needs to prove that, I guess, to him in practice. I think Kyle Parker needs to prove himself in practice. This is the offseason for them to take that freshman to sophomore leap that we've seen LSU receivers take. So let's see it. Let's see it. And if they don't, now you have insurance in CJ Daniels that, all right, if Sheldon Sampson and Kyle Parker maybe don't take that leap, you have CJ Daniels now that's a bona fide number 1 receiver. Kyron Lacy doesn't have too much on his plate. He can settle in as the number 2, and you kind of just fill in from there. I think I understand in terms of numbers why you'd be concerned, but in terms of talent acquisition, this is a no doubter to me that you're not getting another, like, this isn't a guy like, no offense, like Aaron Anderson, who's coming in to, I guess, figure out his role on the team. This is a guy who's a bona fide number 1 player, in my opinion.
Yeah, Aaron Anderson had only played 1 year of college and had missed a year
Exactly.
with an injury. He's a great high school player, but he's young still, and he'd been injured. Like, he was working his way back from another injury that happened in spring ball or whatever. So can't remember if spring or fall camp. But yeah, that's a good point. It's not like that. This is a bona fide proven vet. Like, he could have gone pro and been picked high.
Yeah. Like, I just think you're not taking a risk here with him. And I think you can have qualms with some of the other additions that they've taken so far, more so than him, even if they're at a position of need. Like, I just think CJ Daniels, like you said, the defense, we don't know for a fact that it's going to be top 40 in the country, top 50 in the country. Like, we don't know where exactly that's going to fall. It maybe takes them some time to figure it out. Well, unfortunately, LSU, you do not have time to figure it out on defense because you start off with USC and then you play UCLA and then you're in conference play. Like, things move very quickly. And I'll echo what I said this time last year. The expectation is to win a national championship or be in the conversation for a national championship every year. You can't lose these game 1s, these game 3s, against good teams. You have to come out ready to play. And I think CJ Daniels raises the floor of this team significantly.
I'm with you. Well, we'll keep you guys updated. The next pod will probably be us talking about the final coaching hires. I only have a couple left, or at least to be named, whether that's internal promotions or going outside, like we said, for a tight ends coach. But the defensive staff is in place.
I know the numbers are, I guess, the scholarship numbers could slow it down, but I would assume they would get a portal player in the next, if you had to say, will they get a portal player in the next 7 days?
They're trying. I think corner would be the spot we're looking at there, because that's where kind of guys are popping up. But I think the spring window is going to be big for them. I think that's where guys could pop up. You could transfer as a grad transfer at really any point. So I think as the numbers are tight, but we'll still see attrition. We saw Mason Lunsford, a backup O-lineman, retire from football this week. So by the spring, when guys get a feel for where they're at on the depth chart and that window opens again after spring ball, I think that's when we'll see a handful more players enter the portal. And then that gives them wiggle room to add whomever else they feel they need to add.
Yeah. I was just curious because I mean, yeah, I think that'll be like our next podcast. We'll see. It feels like there should be a lot going on right now, but I agree with you in terms of the spring window is going to be more important to get their staff set, figure out the recruiting, lay everything out, and then kind of go from there. But yeah.
That's all I got today.
There it is, 45 minutes.
That'll work.
Yeah. Thank y'all for joining us. This has been fun. Keep up with us all day, every day on the board. Bengal Tiger On3. We are there all the time, talking, chatting, memeing, everything y'all want in a message board, all of the latest scoops. So, yeah, stay up to date with everything LSU on the Bengal Tiger On3. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for listening on Spotify, Apple. Leave us a 5-star rating and review if you're over there as well. And yeah, for Shea Dixon, I'm Matthew Brune. We will talk to y'all later.